Welcome to Messages from Light with Nikki Avery.
Hey guys, what's up? This is Nikki with Messages from Light, and today we're going to talk about soul knowledge and ecstatic awakenings. And so what we're going to talk about when we talk about soul knowledge is we're talking about when you have really painful and traumatic experiences in your life where you suddenly get this burst of clarity. You get this moment of absolute knowledge and absolute clarity on the situation that you're dealing with. So I'm going to use examples from my own life for this, and I think that's a good way to let you guys know a little more about me, as well as a really good way to explain it, because I had a very profound moment of soul knowledge as well as an ecstatic awakening. We're going to go back a few years. We're going to go back to when I was 27. And I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about what had gone on beforehand, but I had just had my third child, and I had become very sick after his birth, which then led into this kind of spiral of medical events for me. And one of the scariest moments of my life was the day that my son was born, because I became preeclamptic and I had to be rushed into an emergency C-section. But before being rushed into that C-section, I was listening to my son's heart stop and miss 2 and 3 beats at a time. And it was one of the most terrifying experiences of my life. So when we both made it through that okay, and I made it through becoming septic after my C-section okay, I thought we were home free. That was not the case. So about 4 months after I did my 6-week post-op checkup, I received a call from my doctor's office saying that they had found abnormal cells when doing my post-op check, and that I needed to come in and have biopsies done. Now, mind you, they were calling me 3 months after I had had this post-op done. So whatever these abnormal cells were had had 3 months to grow at this point. And cancer is something that runs in my family. And so, needless to say, I was terrified. I was absolutely beside myself with fear that I was going to go in and have these biopsies done, and what that would mean and what that would mean for my family. So for about a week waiting for this appointment, I'm just a bundle of nerves. I'm on the edge of a panic attack the entire time. I can't get calm. And I convince my then husband to go with me to this biopsy appointment. Now, as I'm laying on the table having these biopsies done, I'm so scared. And I'm laying on the table crying. And I suddenly have this moment of soul knowledge. And what I mean by that is, I suddenly had this moment of peace. It was an absolute, total feeling of peace. Now, I'm laying on an operating table having biopsies done. There's no reason that I should be feeling absolute peace, but I was. And as this feeling of peace washed over me, and I started kind of going, why do I suddenly feel calm? I heard a very adamant and loud voice tell me, you need to be prepared, because these biopsies are going to come back cancerous. Now, I was still at peace, but now I was crying for a different reason. Because I knew that this was absolute soul knowledge. I knew that this was my higher self, my higher consciousness, divine guides, however you want to name it. This was their way of preparing me and warning me and getting me ready for what was to come. My ex-husband and I walked out of the doctor's office, and I'm still in this absolute peace. But there's also this huge resolve, because I know what I know. And as we're leaving the doctor's office, I look at my ex-husband and I tell him what I heard while laying on the table. Now, you have to understand that my ex was raised in a very strictly religious family who did not believe in spirit communication. And though at that point he was not following their religion, he still did not understand spirit communication or what I was capable of or what it meant. And so when I told him that I knew that this was going to come back as cancerous, he immediately became very angry and agitated and proceeded to tell me that I could not say that there was no way that I could know that it was going to come back as cancer, that I was calling it into being. Of course, that's part of something that is believed in his faith. And during all of this, I am just very peaceful and very calm. I'm not angry. I'm not angry that he's not believing me. I'm just very adamant over the fact that I already know and that it's going to come back as cancer and he needs to be prepared. He becomes so angry at me being this adamant that he proceeds to get out of our vehicle and take off walking down the side of the road, leaving me to drive myself home immediately after biopsies. Again, I'm not angry. I'm not. Because I know what I know. And if he doesn't want to believe me, that's fine. But it doesn't change the soul knowledge that I've received. And I still have peace in my heart. Over the next week, I hear from everybody. I hear from my family members. I hear from his family members. I hear from friends, from people at church. I hear from everybody how wrong I am for saying that this is going to be cancer. But during this whole time, I continue to stand in my truth and stand in what I knew. So about a week after I received this soul knowledge, we went to church with my ex-husband's grandmother. And she went to a very strict Southern Baptist church, which was not my faith, but I do not believe that any faith is invalid. And I believe that if you choose to go to a certain religious organization for whatever reason, then you should participate. So I really enjoyed going to this church occasionally because I really liked the pastor that was there. I liked the way that he presented his message, and he was typically upbeat. And this particular day was really no different. And as we were moving towards the end of the service, the pastor asked for anyone who was in need of healing to step forward. This is not something I would typically do. Typically, I would feel that there were other people in the room that needed the healing more than I did, so I would not step forward. On this particular day, I was told very clearly that I needed to get up and walk to the front of the church. Now, as I'm walking to the front of the church, my emotions are just whirling inside me. And I'm thinking about what I know is coming. And as I reach the altar, this wave of fear and absolute anguish washes over me. And I remember kneeling next to at least 15 other people. And the pastor walked up to me directly and asked if he could pray with me. Of course, I agreed. Now, as soon as we began to pray and we began to ask for healing, this anguish and this fear grew even bigger inside of me. And I was just bawling uncontrollably. Now, mind you, there's a part of my mind that's saying, why are you suddenly so terrified? You know that this is a part of your path. So why are you so scared? But then there was another side of me that was only thinking about what I was facing, cancer. And thinking about the fact that I was a mother of 3 small children and a wife and a sister and a daughter. I had all of these people that loved me and cared about me and were depending on me in one way or another. And the fear and the anguish that I was feeling wasn't about what my journey was going to be. It was about them. And I remember asking, just adamantly asking the divine to please make this as easy on my family as they could. That I was not asking for this to be taken away. I was not asking to not have to deal with this. I simply wanted my family to be okay. I didn't want my husband and my children to suffer. And as this wave just gets bigger and bigger to the point that it's now bowing me over, I am so racked with anguish and fear that I am bent over with the pain of it. The pastor places his hands on my head. Now, this is not a practice typical in this church. This is not something that I've seen him do very often. It was only very specific cases that you saw him actually place his hands on somebody. This particular day, he placed his hands on top of my head. And at that moment, it was like a giant rainbow bursting over the top of this storm. And again, I was flooded with a sense of peace and a sense of love. And this is where the ecstatic awakening comes in. Because at this moment, I'm filled with this amazing peace and this amazing love. And I get this huge glimpse. And I say a huge glimpse, which sounds like an oxymoron, and it is in a way. But it's the best way I can describe it, guys. Because it was a ton of information packed into a couple of seconds. It's the way that I think of a life review, or the idea of your life flashing before your eyes. That's what this was. It was that blip of a second. But in that blip of a second, I saw this whole plan laid out in front of me. And I realized that this cancer was such a small part of the overall plan that was in place for me. And I realized that this was just a stepping stone. This wasn't going to break me. It wasn't going to beat me. It wasn't going to destroy my family. For whatever reason, I had to deal with this. But I was going to be okay. And there were much bigger plans for me. And I kept that peace. From the moment I stood at that altar until it was all over with, I kept that feeling of peace. I kept that knowledge that everything was going to work. Everything was going to be okay. And nothing could shake that knowledge. Now, a week after I had the ecstatic awakening, I went back to the doctor, and my results were back in, and it was cancer. And I went through 2 surgeries, and I was told that they could not remove the cancer, not completely, and that the only thing that could be done was that I was going to have at least a partial hysterectomy. Now, mind you, I said that I had just had my 3rd child, and I was saddened when I found out that I was going to have a hysterectomy because I wanted more children. And I ended up having more children. In between my 2 surgeries and my final surgery, my partial hysterectomy, I became pregnant and gave birth 2 more times. And I consider both of my 2 younger children miracle children because I carried them and I had them and gave birth to them while still having cancer. And that was part of the plan. And for me, it was a confirmation that what I had seen was absolutely right. This cancer was only a small blip on a much bigger radar. And I never doubted. From the moment in that church until the moment that I had my hysterectomy done, I never doubted. Not a single second more. When I got pregnant with my 2nd son, this was my 4th pregnancy, complete shock, of course. And I went to my ex-husband and I told him, of course at that time he was still my husband, but I went to him and told him, and he was excited about the baby, but he was also scared because, you know, it was our understanding that I was supposed to have this hysterectomy. And I just looked at him and laughed. And I said, you know what? I'm not worried about it. Because I told you, this can't break me. And whatever the divine has in store, they have in store. And it's going to play out in their way. But I'm not going to worry about it. And I'm not going to believe that it can defeat me. Because I know that it can't. And it was about 2.5 years after my diagnosis that my final surgery was done. And I had my hysterectomy done and have been cancer-free since then. But that is the best experience of soul knowledge and ecstatic awakening that I can give you, because in that ecstatic awakening, not only did I see that this wasn't going to beat me, but I also got the peace that I would need moving forward, because had I not had that moment in the church, I don't know that I would have been able to carry my 2 younger children. I don't know that I wouldn't have been so terrified that I would have caused myself problems. And this was my soul's way, my higher consciousness's way of letting me know that even though this seemed like a horrible nightmare event happening in my life, it was meant to happen, and it had a purpose, and it was a small part of a huge picture. These soul knowledge moments and ecstatic awakenings tend to happen close together, guys. So when you have these really clear moments of clarity, keep watching, because soon you're going to get that ecstatic awakening moment, and you're going to see a much bigger part of the picture. I hope that you guys have enjoyed this. I hope that you found some answers in it. I'd love to hear about your own soul knowledge moments and your own ecstatic awakenings. I love talking to you guys. I love reading your comments. If you enjoyed the video, please like it, share it, subscribe. Make sure you click on the bell so you get your notifications and you see when we drop new videos. I try to get something out every day, every other day. And just keep trusting and believing, guys, because you never know what's around the next corner. You just don't. Until next time, I love you guys. Keep growing your inner light. Bye.